Captain Peter Cutsey briefing today, cross-bleed start. The cross-bleed start procedure would normally be accomplished if we did not have an APU running. So we're going to assume our APU is inoperative. So we are going to require an external air cart and an external source of electrics. We have the external source of electrics now connected to the aircraft. That's what's powering the airplane. All right, so let's have a look at what the FCOM says first. Well, this is what the FCOM says, and it's paired with starting with ground air source, AC, electrical power available in the FCOM. And then the next title in the FCOM is engine crossbleed start. So we're going to follow the FCOM exactly in a PowerPoint that we'll go ahead and have a look at first before we get into the airplane. So starting with a ground air source, engine number 1 must be started first. When cleared to start, APU bleed air switch off, engine number 1 start accomplish, and use normal start procedures. Now there's a warning here to minimize the hazard to ground personnel. The external air should be disconnected and engine number 2 started using engine crossbleed start procedure. What normally happens is we start engine number 1 first at the gate, and we'll just maybe let you have a look at the reason being. Here we are here, and the external equipment, the external electrics and the external air, this is the air and this is the electric cart, are too close to engine number 2. That's why we start engine number 1 first. So let's go back into the airplane so that we can do that. All right, so the continuing with that, the engine crossbleed start procedure, let's review it first. And once we review it, then we'll go right into the airplane and get started. So the engine crossbleed start procedure do not accomplish a crossbleed start during pushback. So we'll do it at the gate. We'll start engine number 1 at the gate, and we'll make sure we establish electrics on the engine generator control switch number 1 on prior to disconnecting, so we don't lose all our power to the airplane. That's important, and it's not written in the FCOM. So remember that after we start engine number 1 first at the gate, using external electrics and external air, we instate electrics on generator 1 by moving generator control switch number 1 on, then call for disconnected equipment. Then once all the equipment is disconnected, push back. And once we're pushed back and aligned with the taxiway and all clear, we'll go ahead with the crossbleed start to start engine number 2. So that's just what we talked about. Make sure the area behind the aircraft is clear, because we're going to have to increase thrust in order to attain 30 psi pneumatics minimum to start engine number 2. Engine bleed air switches on. Well, we're going to review this later, but we're just having a quick look at it now. APU bleed air switch off. Pack switch is off. Isolation valve switch auto. This ensures bleed air supply for engine start. And engine thrust lever on the operating engine, that will be engine number 1. Advance thrust lever until bleed duct pressure is equal to 30 psi or greater. And then go ahead and start engine number 2 using normal engine start procedures. And after starter cutout, adjust thrust. So that would be bring the thrust back on engine number 1. We no longer need a bleed air because we've successfully started. All right, so that's just a quick review of the procedure. Let's go right into the airplane and let's start engine number 1 first. So engine number 1 has successfully been started. Now, before we can disconnect electrical power, we have to instate electrics on generator number 1. So let's do that. So that's what we've done now. That's not written in the book. Now we can actually go ahead and disconnect the external electrics and external air. External electrics have been disconnected. External air have been disconnected. We've established electrics on generator number 1. We've moved the generator number 1 control switch on. Now we're ready for pushback. So let's push back. And once we get pushed back, we'll do the cross bleed start to start engine number 2. All right, we have pushed back, and now we are ready to go ahead and do the cross bleed start procedure. So let's go ahead with the procedure itself. Engine bleed air switches on. Engine bleed air switches on. APU bleed air switch off. APU bleed air switch off. Pack switches off. Pack switches off. Isolation valve switch auto. This ensures bleed air supply for engine start. Auto. Engine thrust lever operating engine advance. Advance thrust lever until bleed duct pressure indicates 30 psi. Well, let me go ahead and do that. Right now, we're only at 20 psi. And once I've done it, I'll come back to this presentation. All right, I've advanced engine thrust lever number 1, sufficient to give us the minimum duct pressure of 30 psi. Now we can go ahead and start engine number 2 following the normal start procedures. So engine number 2 is started. Now we can return the thrust on engine number 1 to idle. Engine number 1 thrust lever, return to idle, and the engines are both normal. So cross bleed start procedure completed. Now we would do the complete before taxi procedure, followed by the before taxi checklist. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.